We had a few controversies, a number of yellow and red cards, but we also had 5 different nations win the 5 titles from 3 different continents. We had a first ever Super 1000 winner from Canada in Victor Lai, who also became the youngest men's singles winner of a Super 1000 in the World Tour era. A first ever calendar slam, winning all 4 Super 1000s in 1 year, will have to wait, as both pairs on course for that were defeated. An Seong showed us yet again just how much of a champion she is. Christiansen and Boe finished the most incredible 4-week run in badminton history, and Malaysia got their first champions in the men's doubles at the Indonesia Open since 2008. As you can clearly tell, so much went down at the recent Indonesia Open Super 1000. Clearly too much for me to talk through absolutely everything. So, as always, guys, get in the comment section and add anything you think I missed, as well as talking about anything that I've spoken about in this video. I am more than happy for you to add more context, to disagree with my opinions, to offer your own opinions. Just keep it respectful, and I just love the fact that in most of my videos in the comment section, we get a good conversation going. I do try my best to comment back. Sometimes it comes a little late. It depends how busy I am. Welcome to another episode of Beckman's Breakdown, the show where I take a look at all of the BWF events from Super 750 and Super 1000, including the majors and the team events. This week, as you can tell, was the Indonesia Open, the third of 4 Super 1000s for the 2026 season. There were plenty of good things, and like I said in the intro, as you can tell, plenty of good things to talk about, but there were some bad things, some controversies, with the biggest of those surrounding a new trial initiative, the 25-second stop clock. And that's what I want to kick things off with. What is this 25-second stop clock? Well, it's something that the BWF are trialing. They trialed it at the Indonesia Masters earlier this year in January, and they've trialed it again at the Indonesia Open. Don't ask me why Indonesia is the only country or the only nation so far that has had this initiative trialed. And I should have possibly checked this. I don't know where it's going to be trialed next. Now, what it is, basically, as soon as the umpire changes the score on their thing, a 25-second countdown is initiated. Within that time, all the players on court are able to go off court and do what they want to do. They can change the shuttle, they can towel down, have a drink, they can use cold spray, but they must be ready to go again after 25 seconds. The umpire has the discretion to be able to extend that time if there is an injury that requires medical, obviously if the tournament referee needs to be called on, or there's excessive mopping. And there's one other thing that's actually the reason for a number of the cardings that went on, or some of them anyway, and that is that all players must play to the server's speed. For example, if I was playing and I won the point, so I'm going to serve next, and I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to serve after 10 seconds, there's still 15 seconds left, the receiver, my opponent, must be ready to my speed. I think that's where there has been a little bit of confusion, because sometimes there were a few cards where people have gone, but there's still 10 seconds left. And that has been mainly because the server was ready to serve and the receiver wasn't. Before I get into my overall thoughts, like I've already alluded to, there were some controversies and a number of cards, both yellow and red, handed out. We had one to Thomas Jr. Popov versus Victor Lai. Jonatan Christie actually in the final got a yellow card against Victor Lai. We had Jonatan Christie getting a yellow card against the Danish pair of Matthias Christiansen and Alexander Boa in the quarter final. That was actually one of the ones that was, I believe, I'm just trying to remember, around the server situation. The Danes were ready to serve. Jonatan wasn't, and it was around 16-9 in the third, and he got carded for it. Now, the reaction from Jonatan was pretty funny, I'm not going to lie. After every point, Jonatan, if they were serving, would quickly get ready and almost just be sat right in the middle, almost to show. It was either to kind of like go, right, let's get ready, or to show to the umpire, look, I'm ready, don't card me, don't card me. It was pretty funny, and actually won a number of points. And after the match, the Danes obviously ultimately won. There was quite a bit of fun and joking between the two pairs. Right, I'm just going to quickly, one thing I've noticed, I have got the screen in front of me, I'm quite washed out. I'm just going to just check that. Okay, that does look a bit better. I look less like a pasty white boy. Anyway, back to where I was. So yeah, no, it was quite funny how Dietrich reacted to that. But I guess there was some confusion around that. But the big one, the one that caused the most controversy and stirred up the biggest storm, was in the quarterfinals, also in the mixed doubles, also in the quarterfinal stage, and that was between Goshen Watt and Siobhan Jamie Lai against Tom Jekyll and Delphine Del Rue. Now, it happened at 20 all in the third game. Goshen Watt got a red card, and in the rules of badminton, if you get a red card, not only are you fined $500, which is not a significantly small amount of money, but you also, a point goes to your opponent. If you're carded, your opponent gets a point. So 20 all meant the French suddenly had match point, and they won the next point rather easily. Now, what happened? There was a yellow card situation earlier in the match for Goshen Watt. I will get to what happened there. I think Siobhan Jamie Lai explained it the best in an Instagram post she put later in the day or the following day. But at 20 all, you know, the French had just saved 3 match points. Obviously, the Malaysians were just discussing with each other. There was still, as you can see on the screen at the big time, because it was a big broad shot, you could see 10 seconds. And as that's happening, Siobhan's just turning, talking to the coach. Fine, the French aren't ready. They're kind of like semi-ready. They're like there, but they're still talking themselves. Then it cuts to them just getting into position, the Malaysians. The camera keeps going back and forth. And this brings up a point for me as a viewer, that whilst you can do a manual count, I would like it if the BWF, and I actually think they are thinking of this, having spoken to a few people there, that of having the countdown or the stop clock actually on the broadcast next to the scoreline, so you can kind of at least follow on. It would clear up some uncertainties around how much time's left. But regardless, in this situation, there was 10 seconds left. A number of people online felt that that was the moment at which the card was given. It wasn't. Siobhan had done that, turned back, you know, pairs were getting ready. It looked like Delphine was kind of slowly getting ready, still whispering what a serve she's going to do. Wasn't ready. It cuts back to the Malaysians, you know, Goshen Watt. And this is where I actually did message Siobhan Jamie Lai saying what actually happened at that moment. She said, and she backed this up with her own post. So all that Goshen Watt did was turn to Siobhan and say, come on, we can do this. Something you would expect to happen at 20 all, having just lost 3 match points. And then the umpire pulled over Goshen Watt and carded him. Now, the time was, at that point, over. The 25 seconds had been done, only just. And it was clear, although you can't see on the broadcast, from what the accounts are from people there and from what Siobhan said, the French weren't, they were stood there, but they weren't set to serve. So neither pair were, like, ready. So for me, in all honesty, in that situation, it's 20 all as well. I think the umpire personally should have had more discretion to go, right, had another 3 or 4, like a couple of seconds more had gone and neither paired, then bring them both in. Now, maybe it's because the server has more power, but in that situation, neither are ready. If you're going to warn them, warn both pairs, because both pairs were not ready. It felt, for me, and I spoke to the commentator, actually was commentating on the match, and he said it just felt like such a crazy time to actually pull out a card on that situation. I know he'd been yellowed, so she can't exactly warn him again without doing anything. Maybe that's what the umpire felt that she had to do. But personally, for me, both pairs weren't ready or fully ready. So just go, allow them, okay? And in all honesty, throughout most of the tournament, I think in general, there were some umpires that were a little bit hotter to the carding situation, but some of them were like, if 25 seconds had just gone and the pairs and players were just about to serve, they kind of let it go. So they probably gave them an extra 2 or 3 seconds, which I think, given the fact that players are new to this, umpires are new to this, that was probably the way to go. But like I did say, I've got my phone here. Siobhan actually posted it to Instagram, her thing of things, and I actually think it's quite a nice post. because I think it kind of not only explains the situation throughout the whole match very concisely, but it gives another point which actually leads on to my own thoughts. So this is what she wrote, okay? Many people have been asking what happened during our match at the Indonesia Open, so here is a brief summary. Sun Wat was shown both a yellow and a red card during the match. First yellow card, he was looking for his grip powder because his grip was slipping. The umpire called for him to return to court, but anyone who has played or coached at the Istora knows how incredible and loud the crowd can be. He simply could not hear the umpire's call. Upon returning, he was issued a yellow card. Now, I've played in the Istora, and not during a quarter-final, but I've been there for a quarter-final of the Thomas Cup, and it is absolutely crazy loud. I'm not surprised. Even in my first ever match, which was a group stage at like 9 a.m. or something in the Istora, I couldn't hear the umpire calling my name at the start of the match when I was looking at him. So I completely get that. Now, the red card at 20 all, while our opponents were taking their time to prepare for the next serve, as they had been doing so throughout the match, Sun Wat briefly turned to me and told me to keep going. That's what I said earlier. When he returned to his position, despite already being ready, well before the next point started, he was shown a red card. While our opponents have been delaying the receive so often during the match, throw of tantrums were being called out, only verbal warnings was given, and a yellow card at the third match. Okay, so I think there was a yellow card for the French, but like she said, and I know that she'd put loads of Instagram posts asking for people to cut clips where they were, where the Malaysians were ready to serve and the Indonesians, the French weren't ready, and yet they were only given verbal warnings. It took too long for a yellow card to come. So I think they're kind of angling it, and this is where she goes on about the ruling. We are not opposing the rules that the BWF is trying to implement, which I think is quite key. However, if a rule is still being trialled, strict punitive action should not be enforced in a way that effectively imposes the rule before it's been fully established. Which, again, what I said, in a situation like that, there needed to be a little bit of leeway. Umpires needed. I know they might have been given a directive to be strict on this, almost like learn. Players need to get this. Be strict on them. There's a phrase that's just eluding me right now, but do you know what I mean? Like, the only way someone's going to learn is to be strict on them. Baptism by fire is the thing I was looking for. In addition, granting umpires such significant authority without any mechanism for players to challenge decisions on court creates an unfair situation. Fair point. Players are then forced not only to compete against their opponents, but also to deal with questionable rulings and the psychological impact that comes with them. We respect the officials and the sport, but we also believe there should be room for fairness, consistency, and accountability when applying new regulations. I think she summed that up pretty damn well. Okay, so my thoughts. And I think Siobhan, she didn't directly say it, but she did say she's not opposed to these rules. And I'm not opposed to this time clock. I know a lot of people have used these examples, these controversies, as ways to basically crap all over this and say, what's the point of having a stop clock? You're rushing the players, blah, 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 blah. Now, for me, personally, I quite like the stop clock as an idea, but it needs more time, it needs more data, and more experience with it. With all of those things, maybe some changes to it can be met. One for me, right off the bat, in all honesty, this is just a personal opinion, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this, by the way, is that the rule where the server can dictate how long the time is, I think to get rid of that. It makes things much more streamlined if everyone just knows 25 seconds. Obviously, if both players or both pairs, there's 10 seconds, like we saw plenty of times, are ready, then just start. But if the server is ready and there's 10 seconds left and the receiver's still there, they know, okay, we've got 10 seconds, let's just actually talk a bit more. If it's a pair, talk about what we're going to do next. Use that 10 seconds wisely. Personally, like that, it just make it more streamlined, because whilst the server, as we know when it comes to, say, changing a shuttle, has a little bit more power than the receiver, if you're the receiver, say you've got 25 seconds and my knee's sore. Let's use the cold spray, because I think one big initiative, one good thing about the stop clock is the BWF have allowed medical timeouts in a way, or medical treatment using a spray or quickly putting a knee sleeve on outside of the mid-game intervals, which has been a bit of an issue. So I like the fact. However, you're the receiver and you're like, okay, next point, say you lost a point but it tweaked and you're like, oh my god, okay, 25 seconds, let's quickly go spray it. But your opponent's suddenly ready, you're doing that, and then you get carded because the server was ready. So not only are you having to go, right, manage the stop clock, but then you've also got to as a receiver, keep one eye on is your opponent. So you what can you do? You kind of get a little bit lost. Whereas if you just got rid of that, okay, I know I've got 25 seconds to get my shit done, to get in order and get back on court. I think that would actually make things a little bit easier. But like I said, we need a little bit more time. I noticed this in the Indonesian Masters, that by the end of the week, players that were still playing had got somewhat used to it. They got used to going, right, as soon as the rally was over, they prioritized what they needed. Do I need to get a drink? Do I need to change the shuttle? Because you can't do both. Because there's a few times where players would go off, towel down, and then they asked for shuttle, and the umpire said, no, there's not enough time left. But as the week went on, players started to go, right, no, shuttle is more important. Let's do that. Let's do this. Let's do that. And more time is, because they're more experienced, players get better at that, more time, so that the BWF, and this goes in with data, can look at it. Because I know there's been a lot of questions around people going, 25 seconds isn't enough. Maybe, especially after a really long rally, should they have longer? These are all questions that can be answered and properly discussed with more data around it. You can't, if people go 25 seconds, generally speaking, if players are ready after 20 or 25 seconds, or they were pretty much in spot, so give them 30. But you know that players, if that happened, they would then push up to 35. It's like a speed limit in a car. It's 70 miles an hour in England on the motorways. Most people go 75. If suddenly people, well, why don't we just put up to 80 then? Because most people go 75 anyway. If you go to 80, most people go 85. It's always people are pushing no matter what. Whatever the rule is, they'll always push it for whatever they can. And I know you can't bend the rules too much. Rules are rules. And I do like the fact that the Stopclock does give something a little bit more objective for the umpires to work towards. But there's certain situations where, yeah, players, if they're taking the piss, you punish them. But in that sort of situation, and I think Siobhan was right, did seem to be, not that there was, I wouldn't necessarily play it into bias, because I saw a few occasions where some players just seemed to be given a little bit more leeway and some were a little bit more stricter on. And again, that did fluctuate from umpire to umpire. But just like players getting used to it, umpires also need to get used to it. It's not an easy job being an umpire, I tell you that. All in all, I think the Stopclock is a pretty good idea. And let's not forget, before this, too many players were taking the mick. They would dive on the floor, which I know happens, but then they'd get a towel, they'd towel down, they'd drink the mopper, then they'd come, oh no, the mop's not right, and then they change the shuttle. Now the umpires, because 25 seconds, of course they can extend it for certain situations, but like I said, if a player goes off for a drink, comes off, and then wants to change shuttle, but there's not enough time, the umpires say, no, there's not enough time. I think that is absolutely great. And I know Steen Pedersen, the BWF commentator, put up a post where he had basically compared the average length of time for matches from the last two editions of the Indonesia Open to this one. And overall, each match was a few minutes shorter. Now, I know there's other circumstances surrounding that, other factors I know, but on general, overall, it saved around 90 minutes, so it did cut down, and I think a lot of that will be on dead time. But again, that's where we need more data. I hope BWF are actually managing and recording all this data and actually going to use it in how they apply the Stopclock. If they're going to use it more, or for any rule changes surrounding it, I think hopefully that data is going to be used and hopefully put out transparently so we can kind of see it and people can make their own assumptions from it. But personally, straight off the bat, I like it, but I think the server having the advantage within it, get rid of that. Personally, that's mine. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you like the Stopclock or not. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of no. It's too hard on the players. But personally, badminton is a physical sport. And with it going to 3 to 15, I think even more important that we don't allow players to take too long. I know there's certain situations where it is required, and that has been noted. So yeah, thoughts. Do we want it? Do we need it? Should it be 30 seconds, 25 seconds? Should we have a fluctuating system? I'd love to hear absolutely all your opinions on the situation. Now, moving on from the Stopclock, another one that I got a lot of questions about was, and it's another slight knock on the BWF. This is where, to be fair, when there's ever a controversy or something negative, the BWF themselves do get hit. And I think sometimes it's warranted. They are the governing body. They do set the rules, but sometimes I think it's a little bit misguided, some of this. And for me, this next topic, the scheduling or players getting injured, we saw a number of those, or players retiring or withdrawing. We saw Knut Wittitsan, his back injury. I know he finished the match, but Shi Yu Qi's been struggling. Wang Ziyi showed injuries. Lo Qianyu retired after the second game. I think that was from exhaustion. Ranky Reddy's shoulder forced him to withdraw. And we also had some other players losing early that had done well. 3 of the 4 semi-finalists from Singapore in the women's doubles lost in the first round or the second round. Alfie and Fick refell in the first round. The list goes on. And I think when it comes to players getting injured immediately, like, it's the BWF scheduling. It's too tough. It's too tight. There's too many tournaments. And I think the big one from this is the 750s and the 1000 being at the back end of 4 pretty big tournaments. We had 2 500s, a 750 last week, and now 1000. Now, I think the scheduling around how busy it is generally and the 750s and 1000s are slightly different subjects. I'm going to kind of split those. But what I will say is I did find it quite funny that when I asked for your questions, I had a number of people talking about the scheduling being too tight. There's too many tournaments. And then a number of questions around specifically the Chinese mixed pair of Feng and Wang Dongping going, did they lose because they haven't played enough tournaments? Because there was a big gap. They haven't played since, I think, the Asia Championships until now, which is, a good break. I know there's been time off for them because of the Thomas and Uber Cup, etc. But still, I did find that rather amusing. And it kind of shows that I think, yes, the scheduling can get busy. And I think the second half of the season is a lot more densely packed in general, especially for the Asian players this year compared to the first half. But there are, for me, for the top players, the ones that will probably be aiming at 750s and 1000s, there are gaps because the 500s, whilst they are still big tournaments, they're not really ones that the top pairs should be playing as much. We did see a few examples of not. We saw a few actually, Chen Yufei, the Danish pair, Go and Ner. There are a few others that did play 4 of those tournaments. But yeah, no, I think the schedule, it can get busy, can get hectic. And yes, of course, that can be a reason for injuries as well. But I think when it comes to the injuries, it's not just the scheduling that's the cause. There's lots of other factors. Sometimes it's just, unfortunate incidences. Sometimes, we have to recall that, some players might not be managing their tournament schedule as well as they could. I've said that in the past. Sometimes players do play a little bit more often than they probably need to. I know there's the obligation thing, which I'll get to in a second. And then obviously we don't know the training protocol they're doing. Some players, I know badminton's culture is still, especially in Asia, is still more is better. And sometimes a lot of associations still train their players probably too much volume, etc. And that's obviously over time, it's going to cause injuries. And also, let's not forget, badminton is not an easy sport on the body. In terms of scheduling overall for the BWF, like I said, the second half is a lot busier than the first. It's only going to get busier next year with an extra 1,000, the Super 1,000, obviously Denmark being added to that. So it's going to be 5 next year. And they're going to be longer. So they're going to be 11 days long. And I believe all the major team events are going to be increasing in size from next year too. So the time on court or the time the tournaments take is going to increase, which is only going to make space around it tighter. So I would be surprised if we're going to see a less busy schedule. Okay, I've got 3 things I want to say. 3 things, basically. Number one, this is there are 2 of these, I think, where I think BWF could be. I hope they're considering this. One is the obligated players. The top, I think, was it top 10 or top 12 in men's singles, or was it top 8? It's somewhere around that region. Top 8 to 12 players are obligated to play all the 1000s, all the 750s, and I think 2 Super 500s. Personally, I believe, and I've always believed this isn't needed. I know there's a lot of financial investment, and so BWF wants to make sure the top players are the ones that are going to draw the fans in, and so you need to be able to, for certain, have them. But on the flip side, for me, the players are the main product. So if you're forcing them to play, even if they're holding slight injuries, not injuries necessarily that mean they can't play, but just they're only going to get compounded, the product's going to get worse. Let's also not forget Super 750s and Super 1000s. If you're a top player, you're probably going to play them anyway. Guarantee you, every single top 10 player or every player who could qualify is going to play every single 1000, and the vast majority of the 750s, if not all of them. That works out at the moment at 10 tournaments a year. Next year is it 11? But anyway, 10, 11 tournaments. they're going to play them anyway if they can. I don't think we should force them to play the Super 500s, definitely not. For the top players, that just adds 2 extra tournaments, and I think most top players would play a Super 500 if it's their home event. We see the Taiwanese players play the Taipei Open, the Korean players will play the Korean Open and possibly the Korean Masters, the Malaysian players, Malaysian Masters, Indonesian players, Indonesian Masters. They've got, again, they're tournaments that top players, if it's their home country, are going to play anyway. I don't think we need to obligate players to play. And I know, like I said, there is, and that's because of prize money and points, and obviously they're the big tournaments, they're the ones that all players want to win. If there is a top tournament that can't draw the top players despite all of those factors, then personally I know that there sometimes can be a struggle to find hosts that can financially actually run one of these high tournaments, but in all honesty they shouldn't host. I understand the financial requirements, but I still feel that players will play if they're the top tournaments. You don't need to force them. We saw this with Kunlevat, that he was an obligated player, and he turned up, wasn't able to play, and not only was it not good to watch, with force, that injury can get compounded, but then it took away an opportunity from another player that could have taken his spot. And in the singles events and doubles, especially the male ones, there's such depth of players that probably the next 10, 15 that are waiting to get in can all play at that level, and it will give them chances, and we get to see more players. It's just, I don't quite understand the obligated players. If there's anyone in the comments that can kind of justify it really well, I am all ears to that, but personally, I don't think so. Where I understand, the most of the criticism that has been labelled online and through questions is the 750s into the 1000s or vice versa. So when we got these back-to-back tournaments, or for me, 750s, 1000s back-to-back, week to week, I completely get that. Now, I know it can't be easy to schedule a calendar, and like I already said, it's going to get even harder next year with longer 1000s and more of them. But for me, I think the 1000s, and I would also think that the 750s need to be standalone events. The 100s, 300s, and 500s can be around them before or after. I know 500s are big tournaments, but for me, they are not tournaments designed for top players. Not that they can't play them, but they're definitely not the priority of that player. Either players use them because it's their home event and they want to perform in front of their fans, or they use it as match practice for a bigger tournament. So say you might play for example, Victor Lai recently said on his podcast, he usually played the German Open because it was the week before the All England. He liked to get some matches. He didn't necessarily focus on trying to win the German Open. That would always be a bonus. But it got him competitive match play, got him ready for the All England. So I completely get that. We just simply couldn't spread them completely out. But 1000s need to be alone in regards to the 750s, and I'd like to see it vice versa. If they can't, then 750s after the 1000. Make the 1000 the absolute pinnacle. They are our Grand Slams. They are our big tournaments. And considering we're expanding them to 5 and longer, they really need to be on their own. Scheduling wise, overall, it's always going to be tough on the point chasing players, the players that are trying to keep their spot in the top 32. Now, just to reiterate, in terms of injuries, withdrawals, etc., linked to the scheduling, yes, the schedule is tough. Yes, back-to-back high-level tournaments aren't easy, but it isn't the only reason players get injured, and I really want the fans to kind of get that. Misfortune, is the biggest one. Players can land funny. All it takes is a small misstep. In badminton, you're trying to go really fast in a small motion, in a very small space, and you're changing direction. That is already a recipe for injuries. Some players are just more likely to get injured. Some players' training might also not be optimized. I still think badminton training still as a culture, like I said, of more is better. Time, it is changing, I do see that, but still some ways to go. I don't think we can chalk all injuries up to just the schedule or even the stop clock or anything else the BWF has done. There are many reasons, but I hope from that section you can see that I have some thoughts on the scheduling around the BWF calendar. Now, we've got those things out of the way. Most of the rest of this episode is positives. Like I said, there's plenty of things to talk about. I haven't been able to cover absolutely everything, but I've picked out some things that stood out most to me. So the next one I'll talk about is Pinichpon Teratsukun. in the men's singles. Naturally, this week, a lot of focus when it comes to the men's singles will be on Victor Lai of Canada. First ever Pan Am champion, youngest men's singles winner in the World Tour era, and he's just 21 years old. But I want to give some time to Pinichpon Teratsukun, another 21-year-old who had a brilliant week. This Indonesia Open was his first ever Super 1000. At the All England earlier this year, he was not ranked high enough to get in, and in his first ever Super 1000, he reached the semi-finals. He seems to like the Istora. It was the first tournament this year where we really took notice of him when he reached the final of the Indonesia Masters in January. But for me, the difference between... I've seen his progression. I've seen him live since that Indonesia Masters. But where those were in different styles of venue. Here, I got to watch him. I remember watching him Indonesia Masters and obviously now Indonesia Open, the exact same venue. And I must say the difference in his level and play is rather crazy. Many, many improvements. But what are they? For me, a much more varied attack, much more patient, able to build it up. He's got an incredibly lethal smash and he's very fast, so he's able to use it quite often. In January, after the Masters, I said that he was a little one-dimensional, but also did think that maybe that is because of the faster Istora conditions inviting it. You generally are going to hit harder a little bit more often in a venue like the Istora. But what he proved at the Indonesia Open was that he has a much more layered attack, or he's built it on far more patience, still using that blistering smash, but he's playing more drops, more slices. Even within his smash, sometimes clipping it over, slightly reversing it. There's plenty of more subtle variations. I also really liked his front court. He battled the net so much better. I think he's always been a pretty strong net player when you're generally a more attacking minded. That tends to go hand in hand with having very good spin net shots, because that's one of the easy ways to set up your big attack. But I think he's improved all his little pushes into the corner, all his little subtle deceptions, as well as being able to play net back from net. I think he's improved there massively. I think he's also got a little bit stronger in his defense. He's a little bit of a stiff player, and obviously if you're naturally an attacking player, your defense is something that gets a little bit sacrificed. You see that in a lot of junior players, and Pinichpon is still transitioning out of his junior days, but his defense and his ability to kind of soak up and deal with pressure and different styles of player, I think has also improved massively. Another improvement is clearly happened from the fact that he's played a few finals since Indonesia Masters. He reached the next week, he reached the final of Thailand Masters. He went undefeated at the Thomas Cup, and then he reached the final of the Malaysia Masters earlier, not long, 2 weeks ago actually. And for me, it came across of how much more confident he was, because in the Indonesia Masters, in the final against Awi Farhan of Indonesia, he was completely overawed by the situation. A very, very patriotic and partisan crowd were fully behind Awi Farhan, and Awi Farhan absolutely blitzed him off the court. But in the semi-final, he was playing against Jonatan Christie, another Indonesian player, even more popular, and I'd say the crowd was arguably even louder, yet this time he handled it so much better going to 3 games, showing that I think the experience has helped, but he's maturing as a player. Now, not to end negatively, did seem like he was nursing a little bit of a hip issue that was mentioned in his quarterfinal against Alex Lanier. He was still able to move, but I could see in his semi-final he wasn't flowing quite as well as I'd seen him earlier in the week. And I honestly think the way that Jonatan Christie was playing, I think he did tremendously well to get to the final. But he was lifting out from the net a little easy, and I think with Pinichpon's attack, I thought he might be able to punish that, and he wasn't able to do so as much or as often. I think he was, it could be the situation, but maybe that hit, he lacked that little bit of speed that we know that he's capable of. But overall, massive improvements from the young Thai, and it just feeds into that whole narrative of the young generation, the next generation, combined with the generation that are just going, the 24, 25-year-olds. Men's singles is very difficult to predict who's going to win, and it's in a very healthy situation because all these players seem to be improving week on week on week. And if they're all in that situation, they're all going to bring each other up. Oh my God, in a few years' time, we could have some, well, we already are, but we're going to have some absolutely crazy badminton. So next thing I want to talk about, An Seong versus Chen Yufei semi-final was one of the matches of the tournament. There were many. I absolutely... picking a favourite match would almost be impossible, but the Chen Yufei An Seong semi-final was an absolute belter. It was the one I picked. I got up really early on the Saturday morning because I was doing a BWF TikTok live watch-along, and I picked that match. And I also did that and Victor Lai versus Cho Chen Chen, two crazy 80-minute matches. It couldn't have worked out better. It was an incredible semi-final between these two. So I want to talk a little bit about that match, but it leads nicely into mainly want to focus on Chen Yufei because she's done some remarkable things over the last 4 weeks. Now, many will remember this semi-final because An Seong saving 4 match points, coming back from 17-7 down in the third, and one of those saves on the match point, I think it was 2018, where she did it from a crouch defense, was absolutely crazy. Left me stunned, and I think everyone who was watching it with me on TikTok was stunned as well. But I think this would overlook Chen Yufei's own comeback, as let's not forget, she was a game and 11-4 down, and then 16-11 down as well in that second. So she actually put in her own comeback. She just obviously wasn't able to get over the finish line. What was incredible was that, I felt that An Seong looked a little tired at the beginning of the match, a little bit sluggish. In fact, she kind of showed that a little bit throughout the whole match as a whole. She had her moments, but it was like Chen Yufei was leading, and then An Seong snuck the first game, and then she took that momentum. And I remember saying on my TikTok this is where An Seong's so good. She snuck that game, and then she didn't. I felt that a lot of players in the past get in that situation, and they just go, "Oh, we got it now," and they let their foot off slightly, and they let their opponent back in. An Seong kept the pressure on, up to 11-4. We had an epically long rally where An Seong was looking absolutely exhausted, and that gave Chen Yufei the belief, and then she made her comeback. But, An Seong, let's not forget, she showed what a champion she was, and she did back it up the next day when she played absolutely brilliantly against Akane Yamaguchi. Now, like I said, that match, that semi-final, was really, really good. Chen Yufei probably should have won the match, in all honesty. She deserved to, but then An Seong did incredible things. But what I really want to focus on is what Chen Yufei has done over the last 4 weeks and the improvements that she's made. In fact, if it wasn't for the Danish mixed pair, Christiansen and Boe, with their insane 4-week run, I think we'd be talking about Chen Yufei's the most, because she's played 4 tournaments back-to-back. She reached 2 finals and 2 semi-finals, and ending it with almost beating the world number 1. And what's absolutely astonishing for me is that some people might go, well, women's singles isn't particularly deep, so it was a bit easy for her to get to those latter stages more often. No, I think what's crazy is that Chen Yufei got better and better throughout. The reason she played all these tournaments was that she felt a little bit sluggish, a bit slow, her form wasn't quite on, and she felt the only way she was going to get any of that back was playing lots of badminton. And I think that by the time she reached the quarterfinals last week in Singapore, was the turning point for me when she played Miyazaki. She was a game and she was down in the second, and I thought she's going to lose this. But suddenly she found her foot speed and her accuracy, and those two things just kept getting better and better. She took that into the semi-final against An Seong in Singapore and had a great 3-game match against her there, and then she took it into the Indonesia Open. And even then, I think that gave her confidence when she was 18-10 down in the second against Wardani and made a huge comeback to win that in straight games, and as we know, almost beat An Seong. Yeah, her speed and accuracy of shot were 2 things for me that went up. And what I really liked was that she finished this 4 weeks, which is incredibly tough on the body, especially for singles players, with minimal strapping or issues. I think it's going to be a great springboard for the 2 big tournaments later this year, the World Championships and the Asian Games. I know we had the China Open Super 1000 before, where I think she obviously has a good chance of doing well, if not winning the whole thing if she plays like that. But I am expecting the best Chen Yufei at either the Worlds or the Asian Games, or both, a little bit like we saw last year. And hopefully this year, for her sake, that it isn't marred by another unfortunate injury that we saw last year in the semi-finals of the World Championships. So yeah, no, she is building well. But what an incredible 4 weeks she has had. Like I said, 2 finals and 2 semi-finals, absolutely. And the fact that she just kept getting stronger and stronger, really, really good. But like I said, we'd be probably talking about that, probably be one of the biggest stories from this Asia tour. One of the most successful ones, if it wasn't for the Danish mixed pair of Alexandra Bøe and Matthias Christiansen. They played the 4 tournaments back-to-back, the Thailand Masters, the Thailand Open, the Malaysia Masters, the Singapore Open, and the Indonesia Open. And they won 3 titles and got 1 semi-final, including a 750 to a 1000 back-to-back. That is absolutely extraordinary. In fact, I saw there's a Instagram page, and it's a website I use, Badminton Ranks, said that this is the best results from 4 consecutive tournaments of this level in history. Absolutely outstanding. Not just the physical strength, but the mental strength to do this was out of this world. We talk about service situation in doubles being so important, especially the men's doubles. For me, the mixed doubles requires even more thought. Because, in doubles, if you low serve, I know you can push out and go sides and you can stay in. There's still the do I stay forward or do I come back situation. But in mixed, it's even more heightened. And I feel you can get away with, of course, there's not 2 men, so it's not quite as fast. But I feel there's still just as little leeway for a poor return of serve in mixed. So if you're mentally tired, that's going to be so difficult to do. And that's actually what was huge in the semi-final between Jokel and Del Rue is all 4 players were so focused on that service situation. And I was so impressed. That was what the Danish coach Thomas Stavngård kept telling Bøe and Christiansen. And I was waiting for them to start to crumble in that situation. Also, there was lots of these little pushes and stuff that requires a lot of focus not to give it away too much. And yet they hung it together. In fact, they are the ones that got stronger in that department, whereas the French seemed to fade. It was absolutely incredible. And they kept that going into the final, where I felt that against the Chinese pair that they knew that they were going to play hard and fast, trying to expand the court as much as they can and really get the game, if they could expand it, the Chinese, they could beat them on speed. And I felt the Danes not only did serve situation really well, but they kept the shuttle central, and then they went out to the sides when they wanted to. Occasionally, what was also really smart by the Danes is occasionally they would go against that. So they kept a lot of the shuttles, if you notice a lot of the returns, like half pushes through the front player and just in front of the rear player. If they were out wide, they'd hit it down into the middle. There was a lot going central. But then once in a while, in a service situation, the Danes, or in open play, would go out early on the wide one just to kind of throw the Chinese. And actually the best example of that was in the match point that won it. The wide serve from Christiansen to Cheng, you could see him doing that, looking for that central one. Went out there, and then Christiansen's quick, using the fast corner, using the drift, went all the way across, completely expanded the game. When against what they did, I thought that was absolutely brilliant play. And the fact that they were still being able to think of those things and to execute them to the level they did after 4 incredibly tough weeks, just, for me, absolutely phenomenal. Now, the last 2 weeks, I think the conditions do suit the 2 Danes. I spoke last week of how Matthias loves to press forward, and obviously in the Istora, which also drift, a similar tactic works here. Although it was clear to me throughout this week just how tired they were. They definitely were a pair that seemed to play more in bursts. Again, I did that TikTok live. I did one on the Wednesday, and one of the matches was Christiansen and Bøe against Teratsukan and Terat Tanachai. And for that game, for like 1/2 to 2/3 of it, it was very even. And then the Danes just went on a little burst right at the end of both of those games and just got that lead, just pulled away. And there was definitely an intensity drop from them, but they could then inject it when they needed to. It was really good. The only time I actually saw them really playing at full tilt, or what they played in Singapore, was actually in the final. I think when they got to the final, it's one more match. Everything. We don't have to worry about tomorrow now. We don't have to worry about next week. We go all in. Absolutely brilliant stuff. What a 2026 these 2 are having. They've played 7 finals: the India 750, Indonesia Masters 500, the Orleans Masters, the European Championships, the Thailand Open, the Singapore Open, and now the Indonesia Open. And they've won 4 of them. So they've won over 50% of the finals that they've been in. Now, what's quite funny is that after the India Open Super 750, I actually messaged Matthias on Instagram and said, don't worry, More chances will come. Little did I know that so many would, but what a fabulous period from them. They really are the pair to beat right now. And with Feng Yinzhou and Wang Dongping struggling a little, Zhang Zhengbang and Wei Yaxin currently split, Toei Wei out injured, and Deechapon Subsara also struggling, I think, with some fitness issues. The chances are there for them to win even more big titles, possibly a world title. I know opinions will change after Japan and China. That's where probably most people will get their thoughts on who's going to do well at the Worlds. So obviously, if they have a bad run there, this might change people's opinions. But currently, and even if they don't do particularly well at those two tournaments, they're still going to be one of the heavy favourites for the world title in India in August. Start of the year, I actually felt that they would definitely be a pair at the World Tour finals. I wasn't quite sure. It looks like they might be the first ones to qualify. What a brilliant 4 weeks. And I hope both of you, if you're watching this, or this message gets to you, that you take some very well-deserved rest. Next up, I must talk about Victor Lai, first winner of a Super 1000 title, irrespective of discipline, from Pan Am, from the Americas. He's the youngest in the World Tour era for the men's singles. An absolutely brilliant week. Now, I did get a question when I was doing that TikTok live. Like I said, that was on the Wednesday. This was on the Wednesday one. So during the first round, someone asked a question saying, do you think Victor Lai can do well? And I think the reason for that, obviously, is he is starting to get attention. But it was also that the bottom half of the draw where he was situated had opened up. I think he had beaten Lin Chunyi, the number 8 seed and All England champion, in the first round. And with Kunut Vitisarn having to retire, and I think Christo Popov in the bottom half of the draw also being defeated early, it seemed like there were chances. Now, I answered that question and said, of course, I think he has a chance, but I think I wasn't 100% sold because there were still some players floating about in that bottom half that were dangerous. And also the fact that Victor Lai was known more as a counter puncher than a straight up puncher. So someone that likes to sit back, wait for an opportunity to counter his opponent rather than trying to take the advantage himself. And that's a style that does not lend itself too well to success inside the Istora Senayam. But Victor Lai proved me completely, well, not proved me wrong, I didn't say anything bad, but kind of showed to me and showed to many others that he has other styles in his arsenal. He did show that he isn't just a counter puncher, that he can deliver the knockout blow. Far more proactive. He was darting forward and injecting pace. He went on the offensive and set up his own attack far more of his own hard work rather than waiting for his opponent to make a slight error. Yeah, he was the first one to inject pace into the rallies rather than to wait and counter. That for me was the biggest improvement, or what was different and what actually was a big factor in him winning. Now, in the semi-final against Cho Chien Chen, it was a huge match, that one, and I watched it again on the TikTok live, and I thought it was huge because at the World Championships and at the All England, both his first times at such big prestigious tournaments, he got to the semi-finals and he had close ones, but he lost. And I felt that against Cho Chien Chen in that semi-final of the Indonesian, it was the only match actually throughout the tournament where that kind of doubt seemed to be on his mind, or he was thinking about the result throughout up until that semi-final and in the final. He was such a cool, calm customer, just seemed to be taking it point by point. But in that semi-final, he was a game of 19-17 up and lost to 19, and then just managed to, I think he got a big lead in the third, and it was creeping back again. You could see him, I think, thinking, oh no, am I going to throw, or am I going to blow another semi-final at such a big tournament? But no, he managed to hit it home. And I really loved how he won the match, where he killed off a net kill, because the reason I like that is because in the second game, he had a similar opportunity, not on match point, but similar one to get one, and he missed it, put in the net. So to have that bravery to come out just shows the kind of makings of the man, of the player. Such a great demeanor about him. That has always stood out to me, and it stood out again here. To finish up this nice little section, I think when I was on that TikTok live, I got asked a really interesting question. And for me, it is interesting because he said, the person who put it out said, Is Victor adapting his game or has developed his game, or was the Istora forcing it out of him? And I thought that was a pretty good question. I did answer it, and I've given it a little bit more thought. I think it's a bit of both. I think he had to play that way inside the Istora if he wished to be successful, but he couldn't have played it that well if he hasn't been working on it. A little bit like after Singapore, Alex Lanier, who won, his coach Kestutis went on record saying that they've been really working hard at developing Alex's game to be able to play in differing conditions, especially drifty ones. I have no doubt that Victor Lai has done the same, whether it's been specific for drifty conditions, but I think he has definitely tried to change his style to be someone that can go on the front foot. Because in the, not necessarily the Worlds, but at the All England, he admitted afterwards that when he had Lakshya Sen on the ropes, he played the wrong shots. He was a little too passive. He didn't go out to play. He allowed Lakshya Sen to do that to him. And I know that he took a big lesson from that. I did an Instagram video kind of on it. And we had a little chat. And he said, no, I admit I was being too passive. I did play the wrong shots. And so I think he has definitely gone away and worked on it. And developed his game so that he was able to do it. And the Istora obviously brought it out. He had to bring it out. So I think it's a bit of both. And I know that Victor Lai, this is something that we're going to see more. I think this is why he jumped onto the scene and why he's been able to, continue those improvements, especially throughout 2026, is that I can remember a lot of people who knew Victor Lai when he was a youngster, that he wasn't a crazy successful one, or that he lost to a few other players in around his age because physically he wasn't super strong and stuff, but what he always was really good at was developing his game plan. He was very acutely aware of where he needs to improve. He had a good tactical mind, and so if you have that, you can go away and you know exactly what you need to work on, and you're probably a bit better at being able to bring it out. And I think what we saw was the culmination of all of that. An absolutely fabulous performance from Victor Lai. I had a lot of people asking me, is he going to now be a top 5? Can he get to the world final? Personally, I'd like to answer those questions, but I think it's very easy, not that I'm the one that needs to celebrate it, but it's very easy to kind of always focus on what's next. Let's just take a moment to congratulate Victor and let him really let this victory sink in and live in the moment a bit, and then he can give it a few days or a week or two, and then he can really focus on the Worlds, obviously the rest of the season. Last players I want to talk about before I get onto your Q&A, where I've picked out a number of questions, is I have to talk about the Malaysian pair, Gozafei and Nur Azudin. They also have played 4 tournaments, so just like Chen Yufei and the Danes. So it's quite remarkable that we've had 3 examples of players and pairs playing 4 tournaments back to back and doing incredibly well. It does have something to say with, if you are doing well, keep going with it. I guess it is from player to player. But anyway, they are the first Malaysian men's doubles winners of the Indonesia Open since 2008. And they've done the Istora double this year because they won the Indonesia Masters. In fact, it was a repeat of that final against the young Raymond Indra and Nicholas Yauquim. So yeah, like I said, they've had a really great run. Semi-final in Thailand, final in Malaysia, quarter-final in Singapore, and obviously winning the Indonesia. Now, throughout all of those tournaments, bar Indonesia, they had some up and down performances. If you look at their Malaysia Masters, they beat their compatriots, Aaron Chai and So Yik, and they lost in straight games in the final to the Danes, Lundgaard and Vestergaard, who did play really well. They dominated the service situation, but based on what Go and Nur had been playing in the week, you would have expected them to be the favourites to win. So there was some up and downs. But in Indonesia, of course, they had some fluctuations, but they were pretty amazing. And so why is that? What was different? Or what has been different for this period, not just for the Indonesia Open? And for me, I can sum it down to one thing, and that is Nur Azudin. Now, Gozafei, for me, he's an absolute magician on court. He's been absolutely brilliant, and I think since they got to their world rank number 1 last May, and then it kind of fell off a little bit for them. It was kind of like this thing going around. It's the curse of being world number 1s. I think in that ever since then, I think Gozafei's been pretty steady. He's been the player that's, when they've done well in times, he's the one that's been the better player. He's been the playmaker. He's been creating chances. Certainly at the Indonesia Masters this year, his service situation, no one could get away from him at the front of the court, and it kind of played the same way here at the Indonesia Open. He was winning the serve and the net. He was pressing forward. He was absolutely key in these conditions. But for me, like I said, Nur, he was backing him up. He was, I felt for a while that Nur has been hiding on court. I'm not sure why, but not actively sinking the shuttle or being as quick to move around Gozafei. Gozafei likes to dart here, there, and everywhere. And for me, there's sometimes if a player does that, there tends to be a gap. And for me, Nur was moving into that gap, as well as doing himself. He was also starting to press forward, just actively seeking and wanting to be involved in the matches. I can remember actually being at the BXL event last year, and I was surprised at how hidden Nur was. He seemed to almost not want to play or get involved as much. Here, in the exact same arena, and in some of the matches in the last few weeks, he's been the one. Not as much as Gozafei, he's never going to be, but getting himself involved, actively looking for. And I even saw Nur leading the partnership more, especially in the mid-game intervals. I know in the final that he was the one really trying to kind of chivvy along the pair, get them back, because they were for a game and almost 2/3 they were out of that final. Like I said, I haven't seen these sorts of signs, this sort of play in Go and Nur since they played well enough to become world number ones in May of last year. In the semi-final, they were excellent in all of this. They pressured all the right areas. They were especially targeting Kim Won-ho, who did seem to be struggling a little, especially with his serve. Actually, on Kim Won-ho, I thought he wasn't as clinical moving forward as before, but the Malaysians were the opposite. Gozafei, like I said, magician, darting in. He was creative. Probably on the highlight reel, he's the one that's going to get the most of the highlight moments, but Nur, I felt, was always there, always present. And that's what's missing, or has been missing. I feel that sometimes he's just gone walkabout a little bit. Here in Indonesia and other tournaments, he's right there up alongside him. And in the final, the young Indonesian pair of Indra and Joaquin came out guns blazing, and I felt the Malaysians, it might have been a bit of nerves, did sit back and let the play come to them. But slowly but surely, they changed that around. They were helped a little by Raymond Indra tightening up. But again, by the time we got to the third game, we started to see Nur really involving himself, and Go was just being Go. Absolutely brilliant stuff from the Malaysian pair, and I hope they continue this on the rest of the year. Not that means that it's guaranteed them to do really well, but I think we're going to see more consistent results of them if they do so. Moving on to your Q&A, your amazing, amazing questions. I've picked out quite a few because so much did happen. Okay, number one, in your honest opinion, do you think Kim and Sir have started to decline? I have watched their matches in these past 2 weeks and compared them to those of last year. The defence is less solid nowadays and they make a lot more unforced errors nowadays. Not just in defence, but net play or flat drives too. In their match against the Malaysians yesterday, there were a couple of smashes by the Malaysians that Sir completely missed. Now, are they on the decline? I think it's a bit early to say. Now, I know this was the first time in individual competition that they've lost 2 tournaments back-to-back. They did lose two tournaments back-to-back if you count the Sudirman Cup last year, where they lost to Fikri and Maulana, and then they lost in Singapore to Aaron Cha and Soyik, which actually was around this time of year. Maybe it's something to do with this time of year. But yeah, no, you're right. Their level in general was higher last year at this period, even though they lost in Singapore and the Sudirman Cup, as opposed to this year. I do think, it's like I said, it's a bit early to say, are they on the decline? Let's see how the next tournaments go. I know last year they lost in the China Open quarterfinals, but the conditions are a little more favourable to them. We know that the conditions inside the Istora don't help much faster, and in the Singapore Indoor Stadium. It does weaken their defence, which you highlighted, which is certainly, in general, one of their stronger areas, or where they can fall back on if they're having a little time, if other areas of their game aren't fully firing. So let's see. Let's wait to see if that decline is there. I know at the beginning of this year we've seen there was been some injuries to Sir and Jay. I also know that Kim Won-ho had a few issues. I know that Jill Clark mentioned that splitting the Thomas Cup might have broken their rhythm. There could be a few things. They might just be trying to get that back. I think it's still too early, and that the conditions inside both Singapore and Indonesia didn't help. And I would also add to that the pairs that beat them did win the tournaments and were playing some of their best badminton. So it shows that you have to be a world-class pair like Go and Nur and Ranki Reddy and Shetty, and you have to be at your absolute best. And of course, you also have to see the Korean slowing it down. I mentioned in my last section that Kim Won-ho's serve was struggling a bit, and he seemed, for me, hesitant to come forward. One area of Kim Won-ho, and he did this even in mixed doubles, where he was so good, would be his ability to press and know when to come in. And he's so good from that area. If he's above tape near the front third, it's almost impossible to get it away from him. Here he did seem, especially against the Malaysians, very hesitant to come forward, almost second-guessing himself, so maybe lacking a little bit of confidence. And for me, Serson J, I felt wasn't as composed. You mentioned about how he missed a few easy defences. That plays into that. Usually we're singing his praises, even in the Istora and difficult positions, his ability to find the gaps. I remember that was a big thing last year at the Indonesia Open where they won, was that Serson J was able to find gaps still pretty much everywhere. This year, I felt that he actually got suckered into playing his opponent's game a little bit more. Usually he's so good at just like, if he's ready, he goes fast, but he can just find a gap. Here, I felt that he was kind of being dictated to. He wasn't the one dictating. But like I said, as for a start decline, I think it's still too early to tell. We all know there will come a time where they will start to lose a little more often. But I think until we see it in a hall which favours them, or is at least neutral, let's not think that they are declining. Are Feng and Wang Dongping suffering because of the long break in mixed doubles tournaments? I told you there were questions about the long break, kind of countering people saying that the schedule is too busy. Now, like I said, that question did make me laugh, but still, it could be an answer that they haven't played since the Asia Championships, that they're just a little bit rusty. But let's not forget, in Singapore, the pair they lost to there, Jimmy Wong and Cheng Su-yin of Malaysia, not only a new pair, but I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Cheng Su-yin, hadn't played since before I think actually Jimmy Wong, before then, I think the All-England Masters, so even longer he had off in a tournament, yet those two won. So I'm not sure we can account it to the time off, possibly a little bit. They did look a little sharper, a little better in Indonesia, but for me, there was one thing that really stood out to their play, and that was just how easily frustrated they got, especially Wang Dongping. I wouldn't say this frustration was directly aimed at Feng Enzer, but it just seemed to me that it took not a lot for her to get visibly frustrated. In the second round, when they played the Indonesians, they were 17-10 up in the third. And I think Wang Dongping made an easy error, or they lost a point. And how frustrated and how visibly annoyed she got, surprised me. They were in control at that point. They had the match won. And it was just at one point, and she just got so frustrated. And then the Indonesians actually caught back, and they almost lost it. So for me, I'm not sure, whether it's... I don't think it's the long break. I can't explain it. But just the fact that there was some visible frustrations. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know what the training's like. I don't know the injury situation or whatever. Maybe it could be that she's seeing all these other new younger pairs starting to catch up, and I honestly have no idea. But certainly for me, the frustrations in that pair certainly shone through. What will it take for Wardani to make the next step up? Now, I think this question stems from the fact that she lost in the quarterfinals to Chen Yufei. She was 18-10 up in the second, but she lost. And it actually means that against top 5 players, Wardani has never scored a victory. 34 matches played against players, the current top 5, not one win. So that big question is why? And I actually couldn't quite believe that statistic. And I think it must be psychological. Because, she's got great attack, she's got good skills, her defense has come up, she knows how to play the game, she's got all the elements needed to beat the top players, yet she isn't, and I think it is definitely down to... We could say that she's just a few percent, in all those areas, she is really good. Really good. She covers all the boxes, personally, but those top 5... just have all those boxes ticked even better. So it's going to take an extra few percent in absolutely every department, or maybe a big jump in one. Probably for me in her defense and her basic game, so she doesn't give away as many errors and she can defend a little bit stronger, because I think her attack is still her strongest suit. But I think it is obviously a psychological thing, and maybe that might explain 18-10 up. Not that she's probably thinking of that statistic, but she gets into these kind of good positions against these top players, and then something starts to falter upside. Problem for her, it's only going to get harder now, because when she plays these top 5 players, it's going to be in the latter stages when these players are into the tournaments. You know, we know in the earlier rounds when they're getting used to conditions, that's where top players can be more vulnerable. Maybe the 3-15. We don't know how that's going to play out. Shorter games, she is more attacking. We're all talking about how it's going to favour more attacking players. Maybe that might be a way for her to, you know, obviously in that second game against Shi Yu Qi, she would have won it and have gone to a third game. But let's not get wrapped up in that conversation. I just thought, what an incredible statistic. And it's worth answering why or looking into it. I think it's a psychological thing, number one. And two, just that jump to the top 5 in the women's singles is huge. It's a really difficult jump to make, but it's still quite remarkable that she's never won once against any of those players. Why the split of Arantxa Soyik and Manwei Chong and T Kai Won? Some of you might not know this, but it was announced. It kind of got lost because so much happened in the Indonesia Open. But it was announced that for the Japan Open and the China Open, the next 2 big tournaments, that Arantxa will now be partnering T Kai Won and Soyik with Manwei Chong. Now, I think why maybe the coaches are thinking, well, last year at the Japan Open, Indonesia split up Alfian Ardianto and Fikri and Martin. There were reasons for that. Martin was injured, and I think Ardianto's wife was about to give birth, so it kind of give an opportunity. But we saw how successful that been, and now Alfian and Fikri are the world number 2s. Maybe the Malaysian coaches are thinking, well, let's try it now. If they have a really good result, I know for the Worlds and the Asian Games, those original pairs, I have no doubt they're going to come back because they wouldn't qualify for them otherwise. But if they do really well, it could give them options because it's still far enough away. And we know that the rest of the tournament season is going to be very packed, but then they can have the coaches maybe have a better understanding going into 2027 when we're going to hit the Olympic qualifying. Is do we keep the original pairs or do we stick with the new ones and go for that run? Because who knows? You know, both those pairs are doing pretty well, but maybe they feel like they're going a bit stale and something new. Just to see how it is. If it doesn't work, we can just go back to the original partnerships. We've got time before the Olympic qualification just to give it enough tournaments to see. Maybe it's just opening up the chances. I think it could be, because I do think that Arantxa and Soyik, especially these last few tournaments, have looked a bit stale. Arantxa really, in all honesty, they lost to Raymond Injura and Nicholas Yauquin, and I was quite surprised by how Arantxa was playing. He seemed not as motivated for that match. You know, very quickly, when the Indonesians got a big lead in the first, he seemed to check himself out. And so maybe, I don't know what's going on there. I don't want to assume. That's just how it came across to me. Maybe something new, something fresh might be good. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which player impressed you the most, regardless of the result? Don't think I can actually single out one player. I've got a list. I've already mentioned some, so I'll go through them. Nurzudin, Victor Lai, Chen Yufei, and the Danes. I can't say one or the other because they both play brilliantly, Christiansen and Bowie. But one I'll add to, and actually leads into, I can actually link it with my next question, which was your view on Yuki Fukushima and Mayu Matsumoto's performance. For me, Mayu Matsumoto is another player that I was incredibly impressed with. You know, as a pair, they did brilliantly. They won the match. They won the tournament, beating the world champions Lu Shengshu and Tan Ning in probably one of the most entertaining women's doubles matches I've seen in a long time. All 4 players were attacking well, defending well, rotating well, looking to turn attack in defense. Everyone was alert pretty much all the time, and the differences between them were minor. There really wasn't too much to pull between them. But for me, it was Matsumoto. Fukushima put in a fantastic performance, but Mayu Matsumoto, she stood out more to me because sometimes I feel that she's a little bit flat-footed. She's not as proactive on court. She's got such a phenomenal technique, such power in her forearm and her fingers, a mighty big smash. She knows she's tall. She can angles. She can drive a defense. She can create. She can do absolutely everything. But sometimes she just doesn't show that. she sometimes gets caught shuttle watching a little bit. Fukushima would dive forward, and she's a little bit late, a little bit slow to react. It's a little bit like what I said about Nuruzudin, sometimes just not quite being actively seeking the shuttle, whereas in this tournament, and especially the final, Matsumoto was putting in some absolutely phenomenal shots. She was attacking well, she was stepping onto the front court, and the defense really was clinical from the Japanese. They were able to survive the defense so well, but they could survive it incredibly, under the pressure of Luan Tan's attack, which is one of the best attacks in women's doubles. But then at a moment's notice, they could just find a gap. The amount of times they could defend it and just the front player ended up being static. And what I felt the Japanese also did really well in defense is they would drive some down the line, so the front player would then shift across, and then they'd send one cross. And they just kept playing that kind of situation absolutely brilliantly. Fukushima and Matsumoto, they moved around each other really well. We know that Fukushima is so quick on her feet. Even though she's moving into her 30s, she's not slowing down. She's always swallowing up space. And I actually felt that Matsumoto did really well here too. So for me, I was very impressed with Fukushima and Matsumoto, but it was Matsumoto that was one of the players of the whole tournament who actually impressed me massively. Next question, Jonatan Christie's short break. Now, if any of you don't know, that after the final, Jonatan Christie actually said that he wants to take some time away, or alluded to the fact that he wants to take away some time from badminton, and he doesn't know for how long, which obviously comes at quite a surprise. And for me, in all honesty, if he needs one, he needs one. It couldn't have been an easy call or easy thing to admit, to say, especially with such a busy and huge period coming up with the Worlds and the Asian Games. Two tournaments, he's a former champion in the Asian Games. I'm sure he'd love to do well at both those tournaments. So for him to say that at this stage, there must be something quite serious going on. I just hope that if he is having psychological issues, that he gets the right help. It's not a nice thing to deal with. It did seem in the final, there are a few people, and I know that some people in the questions said that a lot of Indonesian fans were criticizing him for almost giving up against Victor Lai in the final. He did look, when Victor got to about 15 or 16, that it wasn't like he completely gave up, but you could see he wasn't really trying to win, and the rest of the points were just error, basically. But I actually felt that he did well to battle through to the final, because I don't think he was actually playing all too well. His confidence and play around the net was miles down compared to what I know when he's at his best, yet he still got to the final. You have to give him credit. But yeah, no, if he needs a break, if he needs that little bit of time away from badminton to kind of, find his head, find his space, find out what he needs to do next, etc., then let's give him the space that he needs. What do you make of Shi Yu Qi's recent form? Shi Yu Qi losing, was it first round? Was it second round last week? And second round this week in Indonesia. I know that he's carrying some injuries. There was talks of him having a back injury, and I know that he admitted to having a shoulder injury, which is, for me, stood out rather a lot. There was, no full smashes from him this week in Indonesia. All slices. And that same goes for Singapore. The one, I think, slight improvement in Indonesia was that I felt he was at least injecting pace to the back of the court. He just couldn't unleash big smashes, whereas in Singapore I felt he wasn't really moving quickly to the back of the court at all. I think he did try to compensate this. He did try to find ways around it. I felt he tried to go harder on the net, as in even sharper. We know how sharp he is, but I think he was trying to do even more from there. And he actually didn't make all too many mistakes from that situation. But in Indonesia, up against Yushi Tanaka, we all know how quick and how sharp he is around the net. So I think that was nullified. And actually, before that match, I said, if Shi Yu Qi is going to try to go around the net, he's going to find it difficult against Tanaka. And that's exactly what happened. And I think against Farhan in Singapore, Farhan is someone that is just so insanely fast and is always stepping forward, sometimes overcommitting forward, that again, the tactic of playing sharper from the net is just not quite as effective. But I think what I make of his recent form, I just think he's not at full fitness. So I don't think I can really say too much more about his badminton. Hopefully, we know that he was ill in Thomas Cup. maybe whilst he did play and deliver a huge win in the final, maybe that just put him back, and then he's had these injury issues and everything. But we all know, I still think he's capable of big things if he can just get himself back to full fitness or near to full fitness. And last question, your thoughts on a golden age of men's singles is coming. Names like Ikkyu, Lai, and Lanye emerging. If you're not sure, Ikkyu is the nickname, if I'm pronouncing that right, for Taratsukun, Panichapon Taratsukun. Yeah, no, you're right. There's also, you would obviously have to add Awi Farhan, Ayasheti, and Huzan. To some extent, I know Huzan isn't at the World Tour level, the top ones yet, as in, not able to get in. He did play the 500s and did do quite well, I think, in Thailand, actually. But his progression is a little bit slower than his compatriots, his contemporaries. But yeah, no, that's 5 players there. 6 if you count Huzan, or 21 and doing really, really well. Obviously, we know that some of those names have been around, like Alex Lanier's emerged 2 years ago, but has obviously won the Singapore Open last week. I do think I'm with Jill Clark here that we've got a golden generation men's singles. You've got 6 players there. You've also got the generation above, like Christo Popov, who's starting to play some of his. I know the last 2 tournaments haven't been the best, but he had a great 2025 and has also had some pretty good results in 2026. We've got Kunlavut, Kodai, Li Shi Feng, and actually Sen. I know those last 3 have been struggling. Li Shi Feng's got injuries. He said he's living with injuries now, which is not a great sign. Kodai's been a bit up and down. Obviously, Kunlavut's got injuries. Actually, Christo even admitted that after Thomas Cup, I think this is why he hasn't been playing so well recently, that he's got a few niggles and hasn't had enough time to kind of digest what happened there and recover and train up. And Lakshya Sen injured himself at the Thomas Cup as well. But again, in terms of an ability group of a generation, that was a golden generation. Whenever you get 5 or 6 players all around the same age, all having played major finals and win big tournaments, and then you get the next generation just 2 or 3 years later, another group of 6. And then if you actually got the group after that, it's still your Shi Yu Qis, Annas Antonsens, all those players, they've still got a good couple of years left in them, I'd say. Definitely till LA, I think we're good. And then after LA, if we get a few of those falling off, we still got... I think men's singles is in a really healthy position. Possibly out of this group, it's hard to tell who's going to really make an even bigger push and try and become the number one. It's different. They're all different styles as well. So which makes it just as exciting for me. It's not just having all these players that's all really good, but they all play slightly differently. So it's all super exciting stuff. But guys, that is absolutely everything for today. Like I said, I didn't cover everything in the Indonesia Open. It would be almost impossible to do so. Get in the comments and add anything you think I've missed or whatever. You can ask more questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Obviously, let me know your thoughts on what I've said. I don't think there's anything too much else for me to say other than give your thoughts and everything. And thanks for watching. Oh, any of you tune in to the TikTok lives that I did? If you did, let me know what you thought of them. Were they good? I know they're looking to try and do some more. There's ways we can improve them, but I really had really good fun. And I've been thinking, possibly, let me know your thoughts on this. I know some other YouTube creators do this. Possibly I could do my own live streams on, I'm not sure if it works on YouTube, but Kick or whatever, these streaming services. Maybe we could do some more watch-alongs. We could create, some sort of Patreon around it or not. I'm not quite sure, but okay, before we get anywhere that, the idea of me doing some watch-alongs of some of these tournaments, I can't do them all. They will be quite selective to begin with, but I really enjoyed it, and we can interact on the chat, and it could almost be a live breakdown as we go, and then we can use that information if I then do the episode. All the things that come up, it would actually probably help these breakdowns too. So let me know your thoughts on that as a potential idea. But I'm going to sign off. I'll be back with these breakdowns when it's the... Actually, no, sorry. Japan Open and China Open, I'm actually away on holiday, and this usually coincides with these 2 tournaments. I'll be doing a joint, one long super episode, I guess, afterwards. I get back from my holiday literally the night that the China Open ends. So I will be straight away, as soon as I land, I will be watching it whilst I'm on holiday and making notes. Don't worry, I'll be keeping up to date. But there will be one big episode, not 2 separate for that. So join me for then. I'm hopeful also maybe to get one more other main video I've been working on that's been a slow process because of all these other projects coming my way that I am working on around the Thomas Cup more specifically the Malaysia-Indonesia rivalry. It's a really exciting one. But yeah, no, possibly the next video will be then. I'll keep you posted in the community tab. Like the video, share it, subscribe if you haven't and you like this kind of stuff, and I will see you in the near future. See you later.